eventually will result in an economic slowdown. So I'm afraid that the bears on this one have a pretty strong argument that concerns me a lot. You avoid taxation or any sort of government rules about kidnapping fees or things until we get there, which we're absolutely not.
Consumer sentiment in history, the Russia-Ukraine war, low consumer savings rates, and record high debt levels. The government pumps trillions of dollars into the economy in 2021. 2022 is the complete opposite of that, with the government pulling back trillions of dollars out of the economy. Gates is especially concerned about the artificial trap that the Fed created for themselves. The economy is currently being hit by a double-edged sword. One edge of the sword is accelerating inflation, and the other edge is the massive level of government debt. The government now has two choices: to destroy the US dollar or crash the economy at the risk of popping the debt bubble. The Fed has decided to go with the second choice of.
Now, this is nothing new. And when you look at the scriptures, it gives a perfect comparison, which it talks about America in the Bible. And America is the bridge to the new world, the bridge to the end of the world, the bridge to the new rulers of the world. See, America is going to be the last ruling empire or government that's controlling the world uh, before the next one arrives. So when you go into the scriptures, so America is in the Bible. In Revelation 11 and 8, it says, "And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city." That great city is talking about America. See, like that's why Trump say make America great again, because America has been great since they got their independence and started importing the slaves. It says, "And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt." So Egypt is a spiritual example of what's going to happen in America. And the scriptures describe Egypt or America as Egypt in many situations. When Ezra was seeing the vision of the end of the world and what was going to be some of the things that was going to happen in the end of the world, he described America and he said that he named it as Egypt. Let's go into one of those verses, 2nd Ezra chapter 15, starting at the 11th verse. It say, "But I will bring them with a mighty hand and a stretched out arm to smite Egypt with plagues as before." You see, Egypt is not going to be struck by plagues like he did back in the day. The spiritual Egypt will be struck by plagues because the children of Israel is in a spiritual Egypt. That's why it said their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually Egypt. See, the captivity would be in a spiritual Egypt. So this spiritual Egypt is going to get these plagues. What were some of the plagues that was in Egypt? Let's go to one of the main plagues that was in Egypt, and this plague was very significant. I'm not going to say the main plague, but this was a significant plague that was in Egypt when the Israelites first was going to Egypt. Uh, Genesis 47 and 15, it says, "And when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said," see, that Joseph represent the Israelites, and them Egyptians represents the Americans, or we're going to get who they represent in a minute. It says, came to Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money faileth. Okay, so they were saying the money done crashed. Because when you fall, you crash. Same situation. And so this is how we see this is one going to be the plague that brings down the spiritual Egypt, just like it was the plague that brought the original Egyptians down to their knees, begging the Israelite, see the brother that the Most High was using to bring to fulfill his purpose, pretty much, Joseph, and he wound up making Joseph the second man in charge in Egypt. So let's go and find out who is these Egyptians. Who is these spiritual Egyptians? Now we got it in two places. And the reason it said that their dead bodies were lying in the street of the great city. That great city was being controlled by one nation. Okay, and we know who controls America, but let's get it the evidence and the proof out of the Bible. It says here in Joel chapter 3. Now, Joel chapter 3, cross all the theologians say that this is talking about the second coming of who they call Christ. Okay, so Joel chapter 3, we're going to start at verse 1. Verse 1 clearly shows that it's talking about the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. Then part of verse 2 is talking about the Lord is going to fight for his people. You see, then when you go to verse 6, it say that the children of Judah and Jerusalem was sold unto the Grecians. Now, it's going to name these Grecians by nation, okay? And it's going to call them the spiritual Egyptians. Look at verse 19. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom shall be a desolation. Why these two was named? Because Edom is the nationality of the people, the bloodline of the people who was doing this to Jacob and the Israelites. And Egypt is the spiritual indication or the spiritual identification of the nation of Edom. And then Apostle Paul backed this up in Romans chapter 9, verse 17. Let's just start at 13 to get the context. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid, meaning no. So you jump down to verse 17 and say, for the scripture has said unto Pharaoh. Who was Pharaoh? He was the king of the Egyptians. This is how the Egyptians spoke about their rulers. And so this spiritual Egypt, this spiritual Pharaoh here is talking about the Edomites, because the Edomites was the enemy of Israel, was the hated of God, and they are in the place of the Pharaoh, being the slave master over the Israelites. That's why Joel said they were sold to the Grecians, and in 19, Joel 3 and 19 talks about that they shed the blood of the children of Israel. So it says that for this 17, it says, for this same purpose have I raised thee up. So the Most High raised the Edomites up. This spiritual Israel, this spiritual Egypt, which is America, the Most High raised it up. Okay? And so this is how we see what's going to happen in the end. The money is going to fail just like it failed in ancient Egypt. Now, to get the evidence, go back to second Esdras, who was given visions of the end of the world. Look at verse 19. It says, and a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. So there's going to be a lack of bread, meaning the famine. What was happening in ancient Egypt? There was no food. Let's go back to 47. Let's look at Genesis 47 one more time and look at the situation. He said, and when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread. You see, for the lack of bread, people was not going to have pity upon their neighbor. Look at another instance with what he said was going to happen at the end of the world, at the end of the spiritual Egypt. He says, verse 20, and when the world that shall begin to vanish away shall be finished, and then will I show these tokens. Okay, look at verse 22. And suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty. Okay, that's the famine is gonna be the backbreaker. The famine is gonna be what's gonna bring Egypt down to its knees, which is gonna destroy Egypt and destroy the nation of Edom, who are the spiritual Egyptians. Look at verse 24. It says, at that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies. Okay, then jump to Isaiah 19 and look what it said. Verse 2, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother and every one against his neighbor, city against city and kingdom against kingdom. See, this is what it's talking about, the spiritual Egypt. When the famine happened, all heck is going to break loose and everybody's going to be fighting over the bread, the lack of bread. Let's go back to 15 and ended on 15. 15 verse 19. Same scenario. It say, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for the great tribulation. See, this is what Yahushua, who they ignorantly called Jesus Christ, was talking about in Matthew 24. He said it's going to be a great tribulation. And God was going to have to stop the time because it would be no more flesh left. He would have to stop the time for the elect's sake because no flesh would survive. These dragons would starve everybody out and use the sword to kill everybody if he don't come back and stop the time. See, the Edomites would be the ones to do these things. Okay, let's go ahead and get that. 2nd of the 6 and 9. Because he was talking about that when the world was begin to vanish away. He said, for Esau is the end of the world. See, Esau is the one ruling the world. See, he's the one ruling this spiritual Egypt. That's what this spiritual Egypt. That's what Joel 3 and 19 said. That Edom is synonymous with Egypt. They the ones that's holding the children of Israel in bondage, in a hard bondage. And they're going to have to go into slavery when their kingdom fall. Let me see if I can squeeze that one in. Let's get the whole scenario. Let's start at verse 2. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place in the house of Israel, shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, who captives they were. And they shall rule over their oppressor. Here go the Egypt part. Verse 3. And it shall come to pass in that day, the Lord shall give them rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve. See, these Edomites are doing what the Egyptians did, having the Israelites in hard bondage, making them serve them, and doing exactly what they did in Egypt with the babies, destroying the babies before the sons and the boys before they can become men. That's what America doing with these abortion clinics or Planned Parenthood on every corner of the projects in the so-called descendants of slave neighborhood. Same situation. This spiritual Egypt is gonna fall because the money is gonna fall, just like in Egypt, and they're gonna be depending on the Israelites. After that, that's gonna be when the Israelites is raised up into power, when the spiritual Egypt and the Edomites fall. That's why I say Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. But I'm going to leave it there. All praises to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shah, Bashim Kakadash. Yahweh being the name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shah being the name of his only begotten Son, who they ignorantly call Jesus Christ. Peace to the elect, the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, descendants of slaves scattered around the globe on slave ships and through many captivities. Our kingdom is at hand. Shalom.